Hey guys, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Is there any feedback or anything? Because I'm using two devices. I'm using my computer to share the slides and my iPad to talk. Is the audio
No,
clear and everything?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Perfect. Let me actually go ahead and share the video too. Hopefully you guys can see me as well. And let me do, let's see, minus this. Let's move this a little bit, present. Let's see if this works. All right, so just one last time. Can you guys see me? Can you hear me? And can you also see the slides as well?
Yes.
Awesome, 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 awesome. All right, how's everyone doing? Welcome to our second MCAT workshop. I know it's a little early. We do have some more time, so I'm gonna wait like another 3-4 minutes, just so that as many students as possible can join. But yeah, how's everyone doing? How's everyone's weekend going so far? Also, we're gonna have a guest today. You guys know him. It's Sri. It's our MD president. So he's gonna jump in and also help out with the slides. He's gonna give his advice and everything. So I really think this workshop is gonna be really informational and hopefully beneficial to y'all. So far so good. How's yours? Yeah, mine's going good. Thank you for asking. Doing your physics project. Man, physics was like a really tough class for me. So it's kind of traumatizing just remembering it. But yeah, no, it's great. I'm glad everyone's weekend is going well. Election results are out. I'm not going to get political or anything, but the election results are more or less over now. So that's a little bit of stress off everyone's mind. I know everyone was waiting on like Nevada to give the results, and then Pennsylvania came out of nowhere. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about for the past few days, and it's kind of nice that things are settling down now.
Hey, Gavin. And
what's up, Sri?
How's everyone doing?
I'm good, man.
All right, we can. We're ready.
Yeah, let's give it like 1 or 2 more minutes, just to see if we can get any more students, and then after that we'll go ahead and get started. But yeah, as I was saying, this she went through the workshop slides and helped me out with a couple of them, and it's a lot of information. It definitely is, and we're gonna do our best to keep it under 1 hour and 30 minutes. It may go 5-10 minutes over, and after that, hopefully not much longer past that. And this time I am recording the slides, so for anyone who can't make it, that's totally okay. Anyone who wants to rewatch it again, we will upload them somehow. I think a day after this workshop, so then everyone can access them. So hopefully everything works and everyone can get all the information they need. Yeah. Sri, where can we like direct students to find this recording?
On our YouTube channel.
All right.
So just go to YouTube and type in UT Dallas Molding Doctors, and you can find all of our previous recordings, mostly our general meetings, and then there's a couple of others, and then now including MCAT Workshop.
Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and get started, because we do have a lot of information and I don't want to keep our students or our members for too long. But yeah, hey guys, welcome to our MCAT workshop number 2. This is a very exciting workshop for me. I really like it. I like this information, and this is information that I think Sri will agree. When we were like prepping for the MCAT, we probably wish we had or we knew. Yeah. So hopefully this is beneficial to all of our members. The 3 main topics we're talking about are resources. We're going to be talking about different kinds of resources and our experiences with them. Planning a schedule, and for this one, I'm actually going to show you my schedule, and we're going to talk about all the good things I did and then all the bad things that I did. And hopefully that helps with planning your own schedules. And the last thing that we think is also very important is staying motivated. I'm going to mention this several times, but this MCAT process is a process. It's a marathon. It's for most people 3 to 4, maybe even 5 months. And it's easy to get burnt out and discouraged at various stages throughout that process. So staying motivated is definitely something very important. Mm-hmm. But yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first topic is resources. What exists and what would work for y'all? There are so many resources out there. This slide just lists a few. When it comes to MCAT prep courses, Usually these go for I guess a month maybe, and Sri will talk more about that because he's done this prep course. But just to list a few of the main ones, there's Kaplan, there's Princeton Test Prep, there's the Berkeley Review. There's something called Blueprint Prep, which originally was known as Next Step, and Next Step was also one of the big ones as well. They just recently changed their name. Altius MCAT Prep, there's even Gold Standard. And there's many more too that we haven't mentioned, but these were the ones I could think of off the top of my head. Now, if you choose not to take a prep course, you can also choose to individually purchase or use any or all of their content materials. For example, the content textbooks, diagnostic exams, which are, I guess, what you take at the beginning of your prep to see where you are and what you maybe need to work on as you continue your content prep. Full lengths are going to be these practice exams that are 7.5 hours long. They're designed to be as representative as possible of the actual MCAT. Full lengths are a very vital key component of all of your practice. The question banks, videos, and flashcards, and more as well. Kaplan, TPR stands for the Princeton Review, TBR is the Berkeley Review, and Next Step, as well as the rest of the courses we listed above, they all also offer these individual elements to your preparation. You can choose to purchase them or all of them if you choose to. There's also exam crackers as well, which if you guys attended, I think our general meeting number 3, one of our panelists actually said that exam crackers is really good for like cramming last minute information, but it's also another great resource to use, I guess, and implement regularly throughout your entire schedule. These are all third party on the left side. On the right side at the very top, we have our AAMC resources. AAMC is basically that one organization that actually administers, creates that MCAT and gives it to y'all when you actually take the exam. Their resources are top notch. They are about as close to the real deal as you can get, and they are very, very good. They offer a sample test. They offer 4 full lengths, 1 through 4. And we'll talk about these more in depth in the later slides as well. They have Q packs, which are question packs, kind of like question banks for subjects like biology, chemistry, physics, and cars. I think there's 2 bio question packs and there's 2 cars question packs. So they're also pretty good. There's a section bank with 300 questions covering, I think, bio, chemistry, and like a psych-soc section as well. And once again, we'll talk more in depth about all of these in the upcoming slides. And then there's also AMC flashcards. I haven't personally used them, but their resources are very, very good because they're the ones who created the MCAT. And lastly, we have other resources written right below. We have UWORLD, which is like around 2,000 questions. It's a third party, but it's really, really good. I highly recommend it. And we'll talk more about that later as well. There's WESTIN, which is good for cars practice. They release daily passages that you can practice with, which are great. Khan Academy is a free resource that is great for like video tutorials on any subject. They also have an MCAT section, and they also have a Khan Academy 86-page document for psych-soc. Once again, it'll be on a future slide. YouTube channels. There are great YouTube channels out there that also give good, I guess, reviews of content, or even go in depth in some like content cases, for example, bio and biochem and stuff like that. And we'll mention some of these YouTube channels as well. MCAT subreddit. If any of y'all are on Reddit, you should know that there's an r/MCAT subreddit that is a really big collection of resources and a community of other pre-meds who are actually preparing for the MCAT as well. It is great if you know how to use it, and we'll talk about that as well. And Anki Dex. Anki is a program, it's a flashcard program that basically you create your flashcards, you input it into the program, and then every day you do a set of flashcards. And as you get more and more of these flashcards right, it'll ask you less and less of it. But the questions that you tend to get wrong, it'll ask you more of it. So it's kind of intuitive and it kind of targets your weaknesses. But this list is not comprehensive or complete in any way, shape, or form. There are several resources out there. Even if I haven't mentioned it here, if you find a resource that works for you, definitely incorporate it. We'll talk about that later as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add that you can also, there's a lot of podcasts out there that you can also, obviously it's not very active learning, but you should incorporate a little bit of both passive and active, just so like if you are, working or doing something else, if you want to squeeze in a little bit of MCAT time, that's when you can listen to those YouTube channels and podcasts to get some MCAT prep in. All right, so Kevin mentioned a lot of prep courses, so I'm going to be talking about the prep courses side of preparing for the MCAT, and then Kevin will later talk about self-studying. So to start off, there's no right or wrong answer on how you should prep for the MCAT. Just like getting into med school, getting a good MCAT score, there are many different pathways. So just decide what's right or wrong for you. And you might have to go back and forth. You have to do a little bit of research on your own. Um, but yeah, let's get started. So with anything you do, there are going to be pros and cons. The pros of a prep course is that it's very structured, and uh, there's a schedule that you get to follow, and I'll talk about the schedule of when I took it on the following slide. Um, and they basically tell you what you're doing every single day, when to take your exams, what topics to study, etc. So it's very structured, so you know what to do, and you're not thinking about what to do every day. Obviously, with the package that they give you everything, which is the books, their own exams, the online videos, online questions, also, and of course, it also includes the AAMC bundle. So you don't have to buy the bundle on its own. And the bundle includes everything that Kevin talked about: the sample tests, all the full lengths, question packs, section banks, everything like that. And of course, doing a prep course, that means you get to interact with other people who are studying in that course as well. So when I did it in person, I sat in a physical classroom in Green Hall, actually at UTD, over the summer. And, I was, there were breaks because it was a 3-hour class, and I get to talk with other people. Um, so that's always good to have other people on this journey. And so UTD especially gets a $1,000 discount for if you do the Princeton review course. I'm not sure what happens, like the discount for Kaplan, but I'm sure it's something similar to that. Of course, the cons are it is expensive. It's roughly around 2,000. Um, and of course, with a structured schedule, with them telling you what you're going to study every single day, they can't target everyone's strengths and weaknesses, because they have to cater to everyone. The exams that they give you, and this is true for any uh, company, mainly Kaplan and Princeton. Their exams are not always representative of the MCAT, obviously, because they are not the ones writing the MCAT, AAMC are. And their exams are a little bit more content heavy rather than reading comprehension heavy, which is what the MCAT actually is. It's more of a reading test than a content exam. Okay, so the content exams or the course exams that they have is sometimes a little bit geared towards the classes and what you're learning, just slightly, not like fully. Like if you're studying like mitosis for 1 week, that doesn't mean the first exam you take is all about mitosis, but it's slightly on track with their course. Of course, if you fall behind in the class, everyone's not going to wait for you. No one's going to take a break day, you know. Um, so it's not very flexible. Now, as far as to when to take it, because it's like pretend it's like a program and a class, so you have to assign a semester to take it. The most popular ones, the two main popular ones, are summer before junior year and fall of junior year. Okay. And as you know, junior year is when pretty much everything happens. You have to take your MCAT, you have to apply for med school if you're doing the traditional route. That's also when some of your harder classes, upper level classes start to happen. So it's a very hectic year. So planning when to take your MCAT and planning when to take a prep course of self-study is very, very important. Whether you're a freshman or a sophomore now, or even a junior right now, deciding to take a gap year, it's good that you're here at this workshop to start thinking about it and planning for it. So the two options, like I said, biochem is super duper important for the MCAT. Besides biology, biochem is the next most tested subject. Um, well, I guess after psychology, but biochem contains pretty much anything from bio and anything from chemistry. If you've taken biochemistry, this will really help you. if you haven't taken biochemistry and you're planning on self-studying biochemistry before you take your MCAT, it is doable. So that is definitely an option, but just be cautious about it, because it is very important. And I'm not saying taking the biochem course will automatically get you the perfect, you'll be able to answer every question. Obviously, you still have to learn on your own and not just take the biochem class at UTD. But it will tremendously help if you actually do take the course, so you're at least familiar with the topics tested, and yeah, and how to study for it. So that's why I said a lot of people take the course in the summer, um, and then biochem in the fall, and then take the exam in January. Or they when they take the course in the summer, they can also self-study in the fall with taking biochem, and then take the exam in January or sometime in spring. Or they take biochem in the summer, self-study a little bit, take the course in the fall with a lighter schedule, and then take the exam in January. Or they can take both biochem and the course within the same semester, fall or summer, um, most likely summer, and then take the exam in August. So August, right before junior year starts, and January, after the fall semester of junior year, is those are the most popular options. Uh, when I mean popular, that means that's what a lot of people do. Of course, like I said, that you have to see what's going on in your life at that moment. You also have to decide if you're ready. Obviously, if you're not ready, you definitely don't want to take it. You should push it back. Um, but yeah, so on the next slide, I will talk about like my actual schedule and the structure of it and my overall experience. So this is my exact schedule. Um, and that black box was supposed to cover their names, but it's okay. Um, so as you see, it's structured in uh, 5 different subjects: bio, gen chem, ochem, physics, and cars. Psych soc was online for me. I'm not sure if they also have a in-person option also. Um, so like you see every day, it's one subject for 3 hours. And obviously we get a break in between, and then we do practice questions at the very end. So it's not like a regular lecture. There is some interaction, and if you do the in-person, they go on the whiteboard. It's very colorful. They interact with you. They give a little bit of medical knowledge. And obviously you get to ask questions. So these are some of the benefits of doing a prep course in person. Um, and yeah, as you see, every Saturday, I had to take a test, or every other Saturday, I had to take their course exams. So within the course, had to take 5 course exams, and then they also had like 6 other exams that you can do. Um, but yeah, and so my overall experience is that it was convenient, it was engaging. Obviously, having people around me really helped. And like I said, you can ask questions right then and there. Um, and yeah, so duration, obviously, it's just like any class. Well, it's slightly shorter than any class. It was about like 2 months. Yeah. And obviously, they tell you to take the exams every 2 weeks, but and then they assign you so much homework. It's really kind of hard to keep up. That's up to you if you feel you need to take those exams, or you should do those homeworks. It's really entirely up to you. You can delay it when you're uh, at your own convenience, or you can take it all at once and accelerate. That's up to you. That's why I said it's not always flexible. So that's one of the downsides of a prep course. But yeah, so this is the Princeton prep course, by the way. Kaplan, I'm sure, is very similar, but they have their own thing. And obviously, I'm not sure how online prep courses work. I assume it's roughly the same idea. But yeah, we can move on to the next slide.
All right. So yeah, that was prep courses. I asked Shri to talk on that because I've never taken a prep course and I didn't want to give any wrong information. But thank you, Shri, for that. Now on the flip side, if you choose not to do a prep course, there is always the option, or the only option left, to self-study. There are pros and cons to this as well. So just to briefly go over them, pros of self-studying is it's relatively inexpensive compared to a prep course. While prep courses may be upwards of $1,000. When you choose to buy your own material, you can choose, whether to buy, individual parts of a package as opposed to the entire thing. And in total, for me, it costs around $500 to $600. And I didn't buy as much material. So I think, it's relatively inexpensive. It definitely will be less than $1,000 if you choose to self-study, and it should be. If you self-study and you spend more than 1,000, it might be too much material. It might be with an asterisk. But the other pro is that it's very individualized and flexible. When you choose to self-study, you're creating your own schedule. You're going based on your weaknesses and your strengths. So it's really based on how you want to study and how you need to study. And it's also flexible too, because, whereas a prep course may be, for a certain month or 2 months, and it's from this date to this date, you can choose when to start and when to end your preparation, or whether you need to take a break in between or not. So yeah, it is very, very flexible. The cons, it is not easy to do if you are relatively disorganized or you don't have, plan ahead of time. I am the second person. I don't really like to plan ahead of time too much. And when I do, I tend to procrastinate. So it definitely wasn't easy for me to self-study. But if you do choose to self-study, just remember you have to have a little bit of discipline when it comes to creating that study schedule and then sticking to it the entire time. And that's kind of what that next point is. If you choose to self-study, you must plan a schedule that includes specific prep material for content and practice every week. Basically, when you take a prep course, they kind of give you their own schedule. They say, we want these things due at this deadline. Here's when you're taking practice full lengths, and here's where we're reviewing them. Here's some other practice as well that we want you to do at this time, this time, this time. So they've done it for you. If you choose to self-study, you have to do that job as well as the job of the student, which is adhering to that schedule. So it's a little bit more work, but it's definitely doable if that is something you're looking into. If you do choose to self-study, I do have my opinion right here. These are kind of the categories of content and practice material that you should include in your schedule or in your preparation. So the first thing is a primary resource for content. For example, I use the Kaplan textbooks as my primary resource for content. Definitely have some kind of primary resource, whether it's a textbook for one of these other prep courses or whatever you use. Make sure it's going to be your primary resource. You're going to use it in that first month, and we'll talk more about this in the next few slides. But make sure you do have this primary main resource that you're going to use for content. After that, have a supplemental content for any or all sections. For example, I was pretty weak when it came to Gen Chem, so my supplemental content was Khan Academy and some YouTube videos. And there are specific channels like Science Simplified and all the stuff, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But have some kind of supplemental content for any section that you feel that you're going to struggle with, or if you feel the primary resource wasn't enough. Also have a primary resource for practice questions. You're going to hear me say this several times throughout this session. Practice is the most important thing for the MCAT. It doesn't matter how much content you do. If you don't do enough practice, it's going to be a very tough exam for you. So have a primary resource for practice. When I say primary resource, I mean third-party primary resource. AAMC material is very, very special and very awesome. So it's best to reserve that towards the end of your prep. For me, I use UWORLD as my primary resource for practice questions. It's also optional to have a supplemental resource, for example, like a QBank with like Kaplan or Princeton or flashcards from another third-party resource. Another very important thing is to have third-party full-length practice exams. I know we mentioned that third parties, their practice exams may not be as representative of the real thing, but it's still very good practice. Remember, this exam is about 7.5 hours. I know it's been shortened due to COVID, but that's only for this year, I believe. There isn't an official statement just yet for next year. So really, with all these full-length practice exams, whether it's a third party or not, you're going to build endurance. You're going to practice getting into the habit of actually taking this exam under real testing conditions. And also, it's a great way to, I guess, do all those questions in a section. It's great practice. So have that full-length third-party full-length practice exam. And the last thing is AAMC material. Like I said, reserve it for your last month because it's very realistic. It is very similar to what you're going to expect on test day. So saving it towards the end is going to be the best way to utilize that material. Especially the full lengths 1 through 4 are pretty much essential. Definitely do all 4 of those AAMC full lengths and save that like one a week for that last month, and you guys will be okay. I know there are a couple of questions. Shri, if you can do me a favor and use the chat to respond to them. And if there's a really good question that you want me to like address in person, just let me know and we can talk about that. But just for the sake of time, Shri, if
Right.
you could just answer those questions in the chat, that's perfect. Thank you. But yeah, and now we're going to actually talk about some of the specific resources. Either way, regardless of whether you do your prep courses or you're self-studying, use AAMC practice material in your last month. Like I said, it is a godsend. It is a very, very good practice material. There are 3 main categories that I used. There's full lengths 1 through 4, and there's also a sample test as well. These guys are most representative of the real exam. They're 7.5 hours long. The sample may be a little bit shorter, but they are pretty much real exams, except their practice. And especially the last 2, full lengths 3 and 4, are very, very realistic and almost very good indicators of what your score might be when you take your real exam. Of course, you know, asterisks on that, that's not a guarantee. Scores are more likely to be a good indicator of your actual score, but they're not always going to be the same. Everything depends on the test day conditions itself. Definitely take them during your last month of preparation. Take them under real testing conditions. So if you scheduled your exam for 6:30 in the morning because you're a morning person, or because that was the only time you could, when you're doing these practice tests, wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, take that exam at 6:30. Do not practice them at any other time of the day. Practice them as if it was the real thing, the real deal. It will help reduce stress on real test day, and it'll also, I guess, get you accustomed to that whole process and the environment during your prep. Thoroughly review your full lengths afterwards. I'm going to talk more and more about this when we get to, I guess, the second half of this, but full lengths are not good unless you thoroughly review them. Just taking a full length will not give you enough practice. It will not guarantee an improvement of your score. You have to thoroughly review every single question, every single answer. You have to recognize where you went wrong in your thought process, why the wrong questions are wrong, why the right questions are right. It's a bit of work, definitely, but that's the only way you can guarantee that you're actually going to improve between practice exams and also for your final MCAT. Just as a cost breakdown, there's 4 full lengths. Each one costs about $35 individually. There is a large bundle where you can buy all 4 of them together for a lower price. I don't remember the exact amount, so I didn't add it, but they're all going to be on an online format. If you haven't figured out already, MCAT is entirely online. Even when COVID wasn't around, it's a computer exam. So all of these practice full lengths will also be on an online format as well. There's question packs, which are question banks, basically. There are 6 in total, 120 questions each pack. There's 2 packs for bio, 1 pack for chemistry, 1 pack for physics, and 2 packs for cars, which is your reading and comprehension section. There are pretty good practice with basic concepts. Many students, in their opinion, they find it's rather easy or easier compared to full-length questions and compared to the section bank questions, but it's still really good practice when it comes to the foundational concepts for all these topics as well. I highly recommend cars QPACs because it's difficult to get authentic cars practice with third-party resources. There are good ones out there like Jack Weston, but if you want authentic cars practice, cars QPACs will do it for you. And definitely, once again, take them during your last month of prep. They're $15 individually and $76.50 if you buy them as a bundle. And once again, they're all going to be online format as well. We also have section banks. The section bank is just one product. It's 300 questions in total. And there's 3 sections. 100 of those questions will be for bio and biochem. 100 will be for chemistry and physics. And then another 100 will be for psychology and sociology. It's really good practice with complex questions and passages. Section bank is kind of tricky. A lot of students feel like, oh, QPACs were great, let's move on to section bank, and then they don't do as well as they hoped. And that's totally okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to do bad because that's an opportunity to learn and grow from that. Section banks are, as many will agree, they are pretty difficult. They're much more difficult than QPACs, but that is really good practice, especially for the real deal. Once again, take them during your last month of prep, and it's about $45, and once again, in an online format. Now, a couple of other third-party resources that I highly recommend. UWORLD. I cannot stress this enough. I'm sorry, go ahead.
By the way, the bundle right now is $268.
Is that for the full lengths?
For if you buy everything.
Everything.
Yeah, the bundle contains everything.
All right, at $268.
Yeah, I think it's
Perfect.
originally like $320, right? I don't know if there's a discount, but I've seen that discount for like a couple of months now. So
all right, it's a nice discount. It does seem kind of pricey, but once again, these resources are very, very good. So if you are considering buying them and using them in your prep, that discount may work for you. But yes, $268 for the entire bundle. Thank you for that, Shri. Other resources, UWORLD. I highly recommend UWORLD. Highly recommend it. I really recommend it. It many great features and customizable practice. Around 2,000 plus questions covering all of your MCAT subjects. There's options to choose what topics to practice within each subject. For example, if within OChem you're really struggling with carboxylic acid reactions, there's going to be a topic like that, and you can choose questions within that topic to practice with. Basically, you can create your own tests. Within these tests, of however long you want, how many questions you want to add to it, you can choose that as well. So that's very customizable. You can review flagged and incorrect questions as well. You can create your own personalized practice tests. Like I said, you can choose how many questions you want. And there's progress reports as well to see how you're progressing and how you're, I guess, learning the material and better performing on these practice tests. I highly recommend UWorld for thorough practice. But once again, it's important to know how to use all this UWorld practice. The passages and questions are difficult, and they tend to be much more difficult, and they really help build that critical thinking and getting that practice with thinking in the right way to solve these problems. The explanations, everyone will tell you this who uses UWorld, the explanations for both the correct and incorrect answers for every single question on UWorld are excellent. They go into crazy amounts of depth, and I do have a picture. I know it's not complete, but there's a picture of some of that explanation for just one question. It is really, 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 really in depth, and it's a great explanation. It's a great way to learn that content if you've never encountered it before. So I highly recommend. It's $219 for 90 days, $99 for a 30-day subscription or for 30-day renewal, and which is about a month. And then once again, it's all in an online format. There are other prices for different time periods. So if you do want it for longer or shorter, I definitely recommend checking out their website and I guess doing a little bit more research on UWorld. But I highly recommend using UWorld. And I'll talk about how to use it a little bit later in my schedule. Other free resources. So I know we talked a lot about pricey resources. Now there's some free resources that are always available and are also very, very good. Khan Academy, Jack Weston, and YouTube. So Khan Academy has their own MCAT playlist. They have great quick videos for discussing MCAT topics, which are organized by section. For example, CP, BB, PS, and CARS as well. It's good for content review for any section. If there's a topic that you're struggling with within any subject, Khan Academy is usually, like, for me, it was usually the first place I'd go to other than the textbook, just to get a little bit more of an understanding of that content. Also, Khan Academy has an 86-page document and a 300-page document for Psych Soc. Basically, it's this Word document that has in total 86 pages or 300 pages. There's a long and a short version like that. But basically, it's just all of the transcripts for the Khan Academy videos for Psych Soc, and it has all the terms, and it's a great, great resource. A lot of students recommend it because all the terms that you really need to know for the MCAT are there. Guaranteed, not all the terms will be there. It's around 75 to 80%, but it's a great resource. A lot of students have used it and felt very, very comfortable with it. Of course, I tried using it, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But it's a great resource, and I think it'll be on your Reddit too. If you go into the MCAT subreddit, I'll show you that in the next slide. It's going to be linked to there as well. The next one is Jack Weston CARS practice passages. If you type in Jack Weston on Google and go to the first link, you'll see his website. It's great. He basically uploads a new daily CARS practice passage every day with like 7 questions. So it's kind of similar to a passage you'd encounter on the real CARS exam. Of course, this is third party, so recognize that there are differences in material, but it's a great way to get daily practice with CARS passages and questions. They have good analysis of all answer choices. You also have access to a community of other students working on the same passage. Sometimes it's a live discussion as well, which is really, really helpful as well. And that's the next point, live passage and walkthroughs and discussion, which is great. And it's a new passage every day. So literally what I did was I woke up every morning in that last month, and we'll talk about that. I woke up every morning and I'm like, let's just do a Jack Weston passage. I started my day off with that, and then I kind of went on with the rest of my preparation. So it's a very simple way of getting in CARS practice, because there aren't many great CARS material out there, but this is a one I definitely recommend, and it's free. Also, YouTube channels covering content. There are several YouTube channels out there that do a great job of explaining difficult concepts. AK Lectures is great, especially for bio and biochem concepts. Organic Chemistry Tutor is what I used for OChem, especially when I was a PLT leader and I was teaching that or leading that session. OChem Tutor definitely helped me with some of those concepts. Science Simplified helped me with some bio concepts as well. And there's tons more as well for psychology and sociology. Really, if you just like search in the YouTube bar, like the topic that you want, usually you'll find a video or two, a link to a playlist of I guess, videos related to that topic. And there's sometimes MCAT specific YouTube channels that you can access as well. As Sri mentioned, there's also podcasts that you can listen to as well. It's more passive than active, but it's still a great resource if you want that extra help with any topic. So definitely check all of those out. A word about Reddit and SDN, mostly about Reddit. The r/MCAT subreddit, if you don't know about it, I highly recommend going and checking it out. With a disclaimer, and I'll mention that at the end. The pros about this subreddit, it's a great community to ask advice and ask questions. These are other students who are studying for the MCAT, also students who finished taking their MCAT and want to share what they did or their experiences. So it's really a great way to get that advice right before you actually start prepping for the MCAT or right before you actually taking the MCAT, because sometimes they give really good test day advice as well. Several posts with good tips and strategies for MCAT prep for every single section. It's great. On the MCAT subreddit, there's Anki decks. Once again, Anki is that flashcard program, and there's these pre-made decks, which are basically a compiled list of flashcards that someone else used for their prep. Like, for example, Mile Down is one user, Ortho528 is another user. They created their own Anki decks. You can download them and you can use them in your preparation as well. Fair warning, it's a lot of flashcards. It's like 20,000 flashcards or upwards sometimes, but it's a great resource as well if flashcards are what you use. r/MCAT's community info page has an amazing list of helpful links, resources, and sample schedules. So if you look at that picture that I have on the right side of the screen, I know it's very, very small. It's probably difficult to read the text, but if you go onto like your laptop or your computer and you type in, r/MCAT on that Reddit, and you get to the page, there's a post tab and then there's a wiki tab. If you click that wiki tab, it's the community info page, and you'll see they have a table of contents with MCAT resources, links to, for example, general MCAT information, links about MCAT registration, MCAT scoring, how you start preparing for your MCAT when it comes to college classes, when it comes to content review, exam practice and test strategies. There's a lot of resources here. It is honestly the best resource to find other resources out there. So I highly recommend checking out this community info page because it will link you to some really great resources, sample schedules, everything. Now, at the same time, there's some cons to Reddit and SDN, but we'll talk about Reddit first. Sometimes there's too much information. It can be very overwhelming. I remember like when I was prepping, every now and then just to waste time, I'd look at the r/MCAT to see if there's any advice. And I'd sometimes get overwhelmed because there's so many new posts, so much information, there's so much advice, and sometimes they're countering or they're opposite to each other. And it's definitely something that you have to be very careful when you're using it. You don't want to just get overwhelmed by all this information because that will be discouraging during your prep. The next one is posts will not be representative of general student population experience. I mentioned in the previous workshop that the median MCAT score is 500. I think the average is around a little bit higher than that for MD students. The students who post on r/MCAT, the members who post on r/MCAT, they tend to be either one of the extremes. Either they got very, very high scores and they're posting their experiences and their advice, or they're very, very low scores asking for more advice. And as a result, the information on the post that you see about MCAT scores tend to be more polarized. So just keep that in mind when you're going through the r/MCAT. For example, if you're doing practice tests and you're scoring below, let's say, what r/MCAT says is average, recognize that r/MCAT is more polarized when it comes to their posts. So recognize that you are probably doing well above the average or the median, and recognize that wherever you are in your MCAT prep, r/MCAT should not be what you compare it to. You should never use r/MCAT for comparison purposes. Just use it to get your information that you need, any advice, and then continue with your preparation. Last thing is do not copy and paste. Going back to that link, this community info page, there are great links of sample schedules. Do not copy and paste the schedule and just expect it to work for you. These are schedules that people used and individualized to them, and it works for them. It's there for you to use as a guide to implement or elements of it, and incorporate that into your own schedule that you build. Do not copy and paste. I can guarantee it won't work 100% for you. SDN is very similar to Reddit. I said cons, it's pretty toxic. For the pros, yes, it's just like Reddit. It's a good community of resources and advice from peers. It tends to have a bad rep because it is very toxic and a lot of gunners are on SDN. But once again, in all seriousness, when you're using these two resources, be smart about it. Use them for general advice and ideas or specific advice too. But don't get distracted by them during your MCAT preparation, and do not use it to compare or see where you are in your MCAT prep. It's very easy to be like, oh, I'm studying this way, I'm not scoring as high as another person, he studied a different way, maybe I should change my schedule. Don't do that. It's a very toxic path to I guess fall under. We're at the end of this first section. I know that was kind of long, but remember, it's not about how many resources you use, it's about how you use them. I will repeat that again because it's an attendance question. When you fill out the form just to get the MD points at the very end, I'll send a link to that, or I'll have the QR code at the bottom of the screen on future slides. There's going to be a question called fill in the blank. And it says, it's not about how many resources you use, it's about how you use them. How you use them is the answer for this. So that's the attendance question. Now, what I recommend based on all this advice that we just gave is to do your own research and compile a list of good resources that students recommend. Okay, and it could be a lot of resources, that's totally fine. After that, the second step is choose out of that list only a few resources that you know will work for you for both content and practice. And then after that, try and incorporate them into a schedule. And our second topic is talking about a schedule. Shri, at this moment, is there anything you'd like to add about anything we talked about so far? I know I've just been talking this whole time. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. This is all very important information. So let's see. So yeah, I wanted to add that regardless if you do prep course or self-study, you will eventually do some type of self-studying. Most people who do a prep course do end up doing self-study right after, because sometimes they don't always take the exam like immediately after, which you should, because it's sometimes there's so much information. If you delay your MCAT and prolong it, you're going to forget what you studied like 4 months ago. So ideally, that's why we tell you guys to make sure you have time when you study for your MCAT and not prolong it like 12 months or 8 months. Obviously, sometimes you don't have a choice, but just letting you guys know, sometimes it's really hard to retain. And the best way to see if you are retaining it is to do practice questions. And I guess I'll talk about the practice questions in the schedule point, but let me see. UWorld, actually, I think there's a general question about like when to do each resource, which we'll actually address in the schedule. So I won't get to that either.
No spoilers just yet.
Sorry?
No spoilers just yet.
Right, yeah. UWorld is great. Definitely recommend it. Just like AAMC, I would say UWorld is almost required just because AAMC doesn't have great explanations. The questions are great, but the explanations aren't great. And as far as pricing, UWorld, if you buy like a 3-month pack with tax and everything, it's about $233. And if you, I think, did you include that in your?
I think I mentioned the price for 1 month or 2 months, which was a little bit more than that. They definitely give a discount if you buy for a longer period of time.
Right. So in the self-study page, the I guess estimated cost was about 500 to 600. So if you buy the AAMC bundle pack and UWorld, that's about 500. And if you can also buy like just practice exams from third parties, which are usually about like 100 or 150. So so that's very accurate. And I think it's very doable. But it's really hard to say whether you need to self-study or need a course. Like I said, you end up doing both if you do a prep course. That's not to say the prep course was entirely useless for me. Sometimes you really just need that structure and guidance and just knowledge on how to go about this. Sometimes even like going on Reddit or watching like YouTube videos on how other people did it, you still sometimes don't fully know. But yeah, and it's also a really great way to enforce content in you. Um, when you self-study, sometimes you might miss some topics. That's why you have to be really careful about it and be really disciplined. I think you need to be disciplined regardless, but being self-studying all throughout, you have to be extremely disciplined. And as far as Reddit, um, I think I used Reddit so much in my sophomore year, but junior and senior year, I didn't use Reddit. I guess because after a while, you kind of already know it's some of the same stuff over and over again. And I like sometimes there are a lot of people, like it's not fully representative, and it's like it's okay to compare, like answered in one of the comments, as long as you're doing your own research, like Kevin said, and fact checking and making sure you're not demoralized. But I think it's only good if to find different ways that you never thought about, or different resources that you never thought about. And SDN, I literally never gone on that site. So yeah, I think that's it. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about passive and active learning, but I'll mention that in the scheduling aspect.
All right. I also want to mention, I know everyone has a lot of questions. There's so many comments, and it's probably difficult for Sri to keep up with them while he's working on the slides as well. So what I recommend is, if for some reason we do not answer your question, or we don't get to it, or we somehow miss it, save them for the end. I'm going to stay for as long as I possibly can to help out and answer any questions that you may have. And it may be answered in future slides as well. If not, though, just feel free to turn on your mic at the very end when you have that question slide and ask, and we'll be sure to answer that. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the second part. So part 2, planning a schedule, what to do and what not to do. Just a disclaimer, this is going to be very, very opinionated, because this is my schedule. This is the exact schedule that I use, that I created to study for the MCAT. You're going to see that there's some good elements to it, and there's some bad elements to it, and I'm going to do my best to point them all out in the next 3, 4, 5 slides. And hopefully you can recognize that there's elements that you want to include, and there's things that you want to avoid when you're planning your own schedule. So without further ado, here's what my 3-month schedule looked like. So I have an iPad, and I'm actually using it right now to talk to you guys. But on that, I have OneNote, and I wanted to use OneNote as a way to manage everything. So I highly recommend having some way to organize all of your schedule and all of your notes. OneNote did that for me. I imported 3 screenshots of the Apple calendars for May, June, and July, because those are the months that I was going to use to study. And then I kind of wrote down what I'm going to do each day of every month. I at least planned it. And then after that day, I would write down what I did, so that I would know, like when I look back, this is what I accomplished, this is what I did. This is how this week went, this is how this week should have gone, like that. On the right-hand side, you'll see that there's this thing called PS, and then a list of topics. This is actually the Khan Academy 86-page document list of topics, and the names of the Khan Academy videos that kind of go along with it. I kind of wanted to use this as my primary resource for psychology and sociology. I wanted to watch the videos and study the document itself, and then I would cross off that name from the list as I completed those videos. As you'll see, I got only halfway to motivation and attitudes, and then everything else is blank. I'll talk about that. But yeah, just keep that in mind. But just as a general overview, that first month I kind of started halfway through. I started on a Sunday because I'm weird like that, and then I wanted my schedule to look nice. But I started with content review in that first month. It kind of extended into the second month, and I used UWORLD to supplement that. And then my third month, that last month, looks very, very hectic, very packed. And it's because I made some mistakes, but that was really the month where I did my full lengths and everything. Now, having said that, that is not the schedule that you want to use. If you do not want this schedule as your schedule at all. There are tons of mistakes that I made, and I'm going to point them out, and I'm going to talk about the correct ways to go about it. Just a brief overview, my schedule was not perfect in any way, shape, or form. It was constantly being revised. As you'll see, there's some black lines crossed over some days. Those are days where I took rests or breaks. And that wasn't planned either. I didn't plan out rest days, which was horrible. It was a horrible idea. And because of that, I burnt out. And I was like, you know what, I do need to take a break today. And sometimes I was lazy and I didn't want to do much. So I take random breaks. That's what those black lines are. And as a result, I had to push my schedule back. So my schedule was constantly being revised. From these 2 points, recognize that when you're creating your own schedules, it may seem perfect in the beginning, but as you go through it, maybe there's some things you need to change. And it's okay if your schedule isn't perfect to begin with, as long as you're revising it to make it better and you're still sticking to it. That's all that matters. My schedule traumatized me. If I was in that second month and I look back at what I did, I'd be like, oh, I didn't do as much. Maybe I'm not as far along with my prep as I should be. And then I look ahead, and then that red box at the bottom of the third month was the day of my actual exam. I looked ahead and I'm like, wow, this exam's coming up really, really close. I'm kind of nervous. That stress is normal, And that stress is necessary because it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you thinking about the MCAT when you need to think about the MCAT, and it keeps your preparation active and useful. And that's that last point. It held me accountable. This schedule, no matter how messy it was, it held me accountable during my MCAT prep. So I'm thankful for it. But yeah, there are many things I want to point out in this schedule and my notes, some good things and a lot of bad things. And hopefully we can go through it one by one. So I'm going to break it down like this. We're going to talk about the first month, the second month, and the third month for me. Once again, as a disclaimer, your prep may not be 3 months long. It may be 4 months, it may be 5 months. I do not recommend going beyond 4.5, 5 months, because it doesn't matter how well laid out your schedule is. It's going to be too long to do your preparation. You may forget stuff in the beginning. You may burn out halfway through that process. So keeping it around 3 to 4 months, maybe even 5 months is ideal. Anything less than 3 months may be too little prep. Of course, it's definitely doable. I kind of did mine in 2.5, and it did feel like too little prep. But 3 months is kind of 3 to 4 months is kind of that sweet spot. So yeah, the way these slides will be laid out is I'm going to talk about ideally what you should do during this first month, and then I'm going to talk about what I did, which may or may not match with what I should have done. So ideally, in this very first month, it's your new schedule, new me. You have to use this month to focus on content supplemented with practice. Between content and practice, practice is the most important, but there's no point jumping into practice questions if you don't have a strong foundation for all of those concepts. Getting practice questions wrong is good because then it teaches you how to think and how to approach the question, but getting practice questions wrong because you don't know the content isn't useful at all, because you have to know that content beforehand. So really this first month to a month and a half, really use that time to focus on content. I use this time to focus on content prep. I actually use the Kaplan textbooks, except for Psych Soc and CARS textbooks. And that's because on Reddit, they said, you know, they're not the best. There's other resources that you can use. So I believe them and I went with it. My goal was to do 2 to 3 chapters a day from any textbook. With Kaplan textbooks, I believe every book is 12 chapters long. And I wanted to do 2 to 3 chapters a day. So ideally I'd finish a textbook or a subject in, I guess, 4, maybe 5 days. And that's what I did. I spent 4 days for easier subjects or subjects that worked, that I really understood, and 1 to 1.5 weeks for harder ones. So for example, looking at this first month, in blue, it's all OChem. OC 1, 2, 3 means OChem chapters 1, 2, and 3. And I finished the entire OChem textbook in 4 days. OChem comes naturally to me. I mean, I'm a PLT leader for OChem, so I didn't need as much content prep. On the other hand, GC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 12, everything in orange is Gen Chem. Gen Chem is the bane of my existence. It is not my favorite chemistry at all. And it took me a while to remember that. And as a result, it took much longer to actually prep and read the textbook. It took me about a week, maybe a week and a half. So yeah, recognize that, you know, some areas you may feel very confident in and you don't need as much time with content. Some areas you may not feel as confident in and you might need a little bit longer, and that's okay. Of course, don't spend too little time on any content. You know, if you're very, very confident in OChem, I still wouldn't recommend trying to do the entire textbook in 2 days or 1 day. Spend as much time as you need to really fully understand that content. After each textbook, I would begin practice with UWORLD for that subject. So after I finish the OChem textbook, I'd start the Gen Chem textbook, and then I'd actually start UWORLD practice for OChem. So it's like I do the content, and then I'm practicing applying that content with UWORLD questions. I'll talk more about UWORLD a little bit later, but what I did was I did 25 question tests. So I created tests that were 25 questions long. I did 50 to 75 questions a day, and then I'd review them very, very thoroughly afterwards. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. My goal was to finish like each UWORLD subject in about a week. The good thing from my schedule was I knew exactly what I needed to do every day. I recorded exactly what I did every day. And those 2 things held me accountable. If I knew that tomorrow I have to do 3 chapters, the day before I did 2 chapters, it means I'm on the right track. If for some reason in, like, I guess, let's say it was a weekend and I'm like, you know what, maybe I can rest, but I look back on the week, I look at all that I've done because I've recorded it, and I realize, you know, I've really taken this week super easy. I haven't done as much as I could have or I should have. And, you know, I don't really need this rest day. Maybe you can use it for a little bit more practice. So definitely have a schedule where you can write down what you're going to do every day, exactly what you're going to do every day, and what you have done every day, just to hold yourself accountable. Also, the last part is know how you prefer to study and stick to it. I'm not a morning person. I usually wake up in the afternoon, and that's just normal me. And I can't really focus in the morning anyways. I kind of knew this. So when I actually started my preparation, I told myself, you know, there's no point trying to wake up at like 8 in the morning and spending 6 hours like that and then finish MCAT preparation for that day. I'd instead what I do is I woke up at morning time, I use the morning to relax, and then I spent afternoon and evening to really focus on my studies. And that's really how I like to study. And that's what I recommend to y'all. If you want to do 6 hours, 7 hours of studying a day, great, but don't force yourself to step out of your comfort zone like drastically and study. If you realize 6 to 7 hours of what you need, don't feel like you need to wake up at 6 in the morning if you don't normally wake up at 6 in the morning. Find a schedule that most closely aligns with how you feel comfortable studying, and then stick to it. So yeah, that's that. Also, a little bit more notes, how to take content notes. So I use the Kaplan textbooks. For example, this is chapter 6 in, I think, biology. What I did was I read through the chapter and I took notes on any important concept that I wasn't confident in. Of course, there are all going to be parts that I can really understand easily and I didn't really need to take content notes in, but there are other parts of the chapter that I thought, I don't really know and I probably should remember it. So take notes on that. And for very large, high yield topics, create exclusive notes for them. You will recognize what these large, high yield topics are as you continue with your content and your practice problems. For example, amino acids and metabolic pathways. These are MCAT favorites, and there's a lot of information about them. And what I did was I created my own separate document about amino acids and everything that I could think about them, like their PIs, their structures, their hydrophobicity or hydrophilicity. And if you don't understand all these terms, that's totally okay. You will learn them in your classes, and also when you start your MCAT prep, all of this will be covered in whichever resource you use. Same with metabolic pathways. I kind of created my own document just to talk about all that as well. Keep your notes short. Do not rewrite the entire chapter. Like if a chapter is 30 pages, make sure your notes are maybe a page, 2 pages at most, because you're really writing down the stuff that you're struggling with, the weaknesses in that chapter, the areas that you really need to review. As you're writing them down, rewrite the topic in your own words. It doesn't do much help to simply copy and paste it, but rewrite it or retype it in your own words, and then try and teach it to yourself again, or that's the method that I used. And then after the chapter, reread and understand your notes. You're taking these notes so you can reference them later on, so you can go back and, I guess, fill in the content gaps that you may have. So definitely, read the chapter thoroughly and read your notes thoroughly. Use your notes actually. And that way, you'll have a thorough understanding, and that'll save time in the future, because you really want to knock out this content prep in a month at most, your first month and a half of your prep. How not to take content notes. For this one, I screenshotted my iPad after I zoomed out as much as possible, and I still did not get to include the entire chapter's notes. Do not do this. This is insane. Do not take notes over the entire chapter. It takes way too much time. And then on top of that, when you have to review those notes, having too many notes kind of discourages content review. It's like rereading the chapter again. And then it also factors into early burnout. And I'll talk about this. I kind of did this for a lot of chapters, and that's why my second month started to falter a little bit, but we'll get into that a little bit later. What I did here on the left is not a good example. This is a lot of notes for one chapter, and I didn't even get all of it. In total, this probably was around 7-8 pages of notes. And there's definitely some areas, content areas within this that I probably already knew, and for some reason I was still taking down notes. So remember, you want to keep your notes tailored to your weaknesses. Keep them very short, specific, and efficient. These note-taking skills apply to any class as well. So if you have good note-taking skills in one class, you can apply it to your MCAT prep seamlessly. Now, how to take practice notes. I used UWORLD for practice, and practice notes are slightly different, I feel like. One thing I want to recommend before I get into that is have longer practice sessions. When you have a Q bank, like with 300 questions, or UWORLD with like 2,000 questions, and you can choose how many questions you want to do, I recommend don't go one question at a time. Just create a test or sit down and say, like, I'm going to just do 50 questions in a row, and then I'm going to review it afterwards. I did 25 question long tests. I did that 2 to 3 times a day. And then after that, I'd thoroughly review it afterwards. By reviewing it, I would take notes on any confusing or new concept. I'd also take notes on any question that I got wrong, because those are things or concepts you definitely want to review. And then obviously review your notes after that practice session. So after these 25 questions, I would actually review all 25 questions again and take notes and then review those notes. In total, that took me like about an hour and a half. And it shouldn't be too long once you get into the hang of it. But whether you got the question right or wrong, review all the answer choices. This, you're going to hear me say it several times, but this is super important. The MCAT does not care how much content you know. It cares about how you answer these questions. And practice is the best way to get that practice for answering questions, but only if you know how to review those notes. So review all the answer choices, whether you got the question right or not. So what I recommend is, when you're reviewing that test that you just took, understand the concept again, reread the passage and reread the question, figure out why those, if there's 4 answer choices, figure out why 3 of those answer choices are wrong, what makes them wrong, and how you can recognize them in the future. Also recognize which question or which answer choice is right, why it is correct, and how you can recognize that in the future as well. And then if you did get the question wrong, or if you got the right answer, but through the wrong thought process, figure out where in that thought process you went wrong. The goal is not understanding, oh, this is the right answer. It's understanding how in the future, if you encounter a similar question, how you won't make that same mistake again. So you have to really figure out where in your thought process you went wrong, and then how you can prevent that from happening in the future again. The last thing I want to mention is get comfortable with failure. I'm a bio major and I really like bio, and I thought it was fun and interesting and nice. I did the content review with Kaplan and it was okay. And then I went into UWORLD and I started my first test and I expected, a pretty decent score. I got like 30%. I got 30-40% on like the first 3 or 4 practice questions that I set up with UWORLD. And it was discouraging. But as I continued with prep, I realized that, it's best to get comfortable with this failure, because whenever you fail in UWORLD or fail in the practice test, that's okay. It's not the real thing. And this kind of recognizes that this is an opportunity for you to learn from those mistakes, to go through a more thorough understanding. So the next time you encounter similar questions, you won't make that same mistake again. So failure should be your best friend during your MCAT prep. I can guarantee everyone fails at some point in one way or the other during their preparation. And as long as you seize that opportunity to relearn and rethink and figure out where you went wrong and how to fix it next time, you're learning, and I guarantee you'll do much better on the next one. And on the right is just a picture of some of my notes for UWORLD. These questions are random. These topics do not necessarily like relate to each other. So like if you can read it, I know it's a very small screen. Like at the top, I talked a little bit about, I think, sodium absorption. Then right below that, spleen function. Somewhere below the SDS page, and then bacteria versus like eukaryotes, gap junctions. It's just a list of concepts that I felt were tricky for me, and I should really review that. And that's what my UWORLD notes were. And then I would review this and review the concepts and topics as well. Now, the second month, and it's called procrastination and a bad example because my example is a bad example, and hopefully we can figure out why. But looking at my second month in June, we have a lot of black lines going through. These are rest days that I just took randomly, just because I was burnt out. I was taking too many content notes, too large of content notes, and super inefficient, and I was tired. Also, if you look at like days 10, 11, and 12, I did do stuff. I read a chapter for, I think that was biology, but that was 1 chapter a day. I didn't do nearly as much as I wanted to. And as a result, I kept pushing my schedule back. It wasn't as good. Ideally, in your second month, what you want to do is focus on third-party practice and full lengths. You want to actually start your third-party full-length exams during the second month, and you want to supplement it with content review as needed. So remember, practice is the most important thing. So really, you want 2 months of practice and 1 month at the very beginning for content in your total 3-month schedule. So really start practice early, and your second month should really focus on this third-party practice, whether it's UWORLD or Question Bank. And you should also start your full lengths, your third-party full lengths at this time. And then if there's ever a concept that you're still struggling with, then go back to your content and review that stuff. But ideally, your content review should only take 1 month, at most 1.5 months. And then after that, you really need to start practicing applying those concepts. Practice is the most important thing on your MCAT prep. The MCAT is built different. The MCAT is different from any college exam you've ever encountered. It requires a lot of application. It is different. And like traditionally, the way I study is I use content and then I just take the college exam. It does not work for the MCAT. I can guarantee you that. So start your practice early and use your practice efficiently by actually thoroughly reviewing it afterwards, and then only using content in your second and third months just to reinforce any concepts you're still shaky on. This month was pretty tough for me. My prep suffered a lot, and these are the bad examples below. I was burnt out from excessive content prep. I took random days off, and those are the black lines we just talked about. As a result, I pushed my schedule back multiple times. I'll talk about this later, but it's okay to push your schedule back for the right reasons. If you're lazy or you're procrastinating or you're burnt out because you made a mistake before, don't push your schedule back. I mean, burnt out, definitely, we do need to create more time for you to relax and fix your schedule. But for laziness and because you're just tired and not feeling it, those aren't good enough reasons to push your schedule back. Remember, if you're self-studying, especially, you created that schedule and you have to adhere to it. So this is the part where you have to be strict on yourself and be like, look, I got to stick to the schedule even though I don't want to. I gave up on a resource and then I didn't look for an alternative. Going back to that psychology, sociology, Khan Academy 86-page document, that list of purple terms, I only got halfway through. And if you look at the schedule, it was like I wrote PS 13, PS 14, 15 in light purple. That stops at PS 18 halfway through, and I just never continued it. For some reason, I wasn't using the resource right, obviously, but it wasn't working for me. And I'll talk about that later as well. So it's okay to give up on a resource as long as you have an alternative and you recognize the reasons why you had to do it. We'll talk about that later, but I gave up on a resource and I didn't look for an alternative, and that's a big no-no. The last thing that I didn't do right was I didn't practice any full lengths until my last month. This second month is a great time to practice full lengths, get into the habit of taking these exams and also practicing questions. I didn't do any of that except for a little bit of UWorld, but that is also pretty risky. So don't do that. So going back to some of those topics, rest days are important. Do not burn out. Please don't burn out. It's definitely a marathon. But incorporate rest days, fixed planned rest days into your schedule. Don't just take random rest days. So in the same way that you plan each day's preparation for like your MCAT material, plan to have fixed rest days in your schedule. I mean, a day off is a great way to de-stress and prevent burnout. Also, you can view it as a reward. So for example, if you work really hard that week, you're kind of working towards that Saturday or that Sunday where you can completely rest and relax and not think about the MCAT. So view it as a reward at the end of the week. And that way you'll actually feel refreshed and ready to tackle that next week. You can even use a rest day to catch up on your schedule. If you feel like you've not been doing, you've been falling slightly behind on your schedule for any reason, you can use a rest day if you feel, up to it and motivated and comfortable. Once again, don't burn out. But if you feel, up to it, you can use that rest day to catch up on a little bit of that material or your schedule. Also, if as a disclaimer, if you're replacing your rest days for this reason, like if you're replacing rest days to catch up on your prep too often, you might want to rethink about restructuring your schedule to allow for more time. It does you no good to not have any rest days in your schedule at all. So if you tend to, start losing your rest days because you're catching up on work that you should have been doing, like I guess the last week, maybe you want to restructure your schedule, give yourself a little bit more time so you can actually catch up on that work. And also, rest days are great because you have to expect the unexpected. You set aside 3 to 4 months of free time. There's no guarantee that something's not going to happen. You might fall sick and you might have to take a week off. Maybe there's like a vacation that you have to go to, a family matter. Expect the unexpected, and rest days do a great job of serving as a buffer so that you can still handle that as well as continue with your MCAT preparation without falling too far behind. So for example, reserve Saturdays. For me, I would want to reserve Saturdays for time with family, friends, or personal hobbies. Just 2 cool pictures of yoga and listening to music, but those are great ways to enjoy your rest day. When a resource no longer works for you. So jumping back to this is the psychology, sociology, 86 Kaplan document topic list. I only got halfway through, and then that's when I quit the resource. And my big 3 points for that is, first, identify why that resource wasn't working for you. Identify why the resource is not working. Many times the issue is not the resource itself, but how you use it. Everyone who talks about the Kaplan 86-page document praises it because it does a great job of summarizing all the topics you need to know, provided that you use it the right way. You have to, if there's a topic that you don't, or a concept you don't understand, you have to search it and do a little bit more research afterwards. When you're watching the videos, you can't just casually watch the videos. You have to kind of focus as if it's a lecture. I didn't do that. And as a result, the resource didn't work for me. The second point is, once you recognize or identify why that resource isn't working, make the necessary changes to make it work if you can. So in my case, the videos weren't working because I wasn't paying attention. The necessary changes: start paying attention. Maybe start taking notes during the lecture itself. Maybe reviewing the concepts a little bit more often or a little bit more frequently. And that way, the resource might actually start to work. Now, if you do all of that stuff, you identify why it doesn't work, and you make the necessary changes, if all else fails, don't be afraid to remove it from your preparation. Just because everyone says, oh, this resource is great, you have to use it, otherwise it's not going to help you, don't buy that. Resources work differently for different people. For example, I can't work with flashcards, but for some, like one of my friends, flashcards are like the way to go, 100%. If a resource that you chose initially to work in your schedule, if it doesn't work anymore and you've tried your best to make it work, it's okay. Don't be afraid to remove it from your preparation or your schedule, but be sure to find an alternative resource. For me, my psychology, sociology, if you remember, I chose not to read the Kaplan textbook. I chose to use the PsychSoc Khan Academy document, 86 pages, and the videos as my primary resource. And then I just quit it halfway through, right? I stopped using that resource. I just lost my primary content resource for psychology and sociology, and I didn't find an alternative. And as you'll see in a minute, I had to pay the price for that in the 3rd month. So this is the last month in a 3-month schedule. I call this the mean green MCAT machine. Why? Because in this last month, you are really grinding. You see that red box that you highlighted. You know your MCAT test date, your official test date is coming up, and you are under a decent amount of stress. You're like, you can look back and see all the work you've done, which is great, but you still feel it's not enough. And that way you're actually working towards this goal a lot more harder than you should. And that's okay. And it happens to everyone. Once again, don't get too stressed out. And even if you feel like you're not prepared, most of the time you are prepared. You'll never really feel 100% confident to take your actual MCAT on test day. And you may feel the temptation to push it back, but you have to recognize the difference between feeling that anxiety, that normal anxiety the day before, the week before, versus actually not being ready to take your exam. So you have to recognize that and then make a decision whether to push it back or not. I definitely felt it in that last week. I didn't have any psych-soc content prep, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Should I push it back or not? And I kind of made the decision that nope, I can figure it out, and I didn't push it back. And I'm kind of glad I didn't. But definitely that's something everyone encounters during the preparation, and that's something that you'll eventually encounter, and you'll have to make that decision for yourself. But ideally, in your last month of preparation, you want to use this month to focus on AAMC practice material, supplemented with more practice review. So that previous month was third-party practice. This month is all of AAMC. Once again, to reiterate, AAMC's full lengths, they have 1 through 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 full length. There's also the sample test that you can also take as well, the 6 Q packs, and there's a section bank. If you choose to use any or all of them, I highly recommend using all of them, but thoroughly review all the practice that you do with AAMC. It is the most representative thing you can find when it comes to the MCAT. And if you thoroughly review it, you're going to feel more prepared and more confident for your actual test on test day. Now, since I didn't work hard enough in the month before, I kind of made it up with this month. As you guys can see, this month is very, very packed. It's very cluttered. It's difficult to I guess, decipher. But what I did was, because I didn't do full lengths the month before, remember, start your full lengths for your third party in your second month. I had to squeeze it into this month as well. So I did all of Kaplan full lengths 1 through 3, and then I did all of my AAMC full lengths 1 through 4 in 4 weeks. I don't recommend that. It's a full length is 7.5 hours just sitting down taking a test, and then the rest of the day you really don't want to focus on anything. So really, for every full length, you're going to spend 1 whole day on it. I did 7 full lengths in 4 weeks. That's about 2 full lengths a week. It's definitely tough. It was definitely stressful, and I really didn't have time to burn out because my exam was right around the corner. What I also did was, to get more cars practice, I practiced Jack Weston passages every day. Remember, they upload daily passages, so that's what I did every day for this entire month, and it was really good practice, I felt like, as well as the cars Q packs that AMC provides. I finished UWORLD questions for most subjects. For some reason, I didn't do UWORLD for psychology, sociology. That's my biggest regret. I guess I just didn't want to study that subject for some reason. But UWORLD was, once again, a great resource, and I kind of finished it during this month. I also did most of the Q packs and most of the section bank questions as well. Those 2 resources at the very end are optional, but they're also very, very good, and they can definitely help aid your preparation. Now, to kind of break down what I did, full lengths, talking about full lengths are the best, but not all of them are equal. So by far, they're the best resources that you can use to prepare for your MCAT. Remember, these are supposed to be representative of the actual exam. So there's 7.5 hour practice exams designed to be just like the actual MCAT. Once again, third-party full lengths may be different, and are usually slightly different than AAMC full lengths, while the latter is much more representative. But the biggest advice I can give is take them under real testing conditions. So practice waking up at the actual exam time. Like if your exam is at 6:30 in the morning, practice waking up in preparation for that, especially when you're taking these practice full lengths. Also, lock yourself in your room or somewhere where you're completely isolated. There's no distractions. Do not talk to anybody during this entire 7.5 hours. I know that's a lot, and I know it's just a practice exam, but definitely take it under real testing conditions, because you definitely cannot do that on test day. Make sure, like, when you're taking it, you have a desk, you have your computer, you have no resources around, there's no devices, no cheating. I know it's a full length, and sometimes even I've experienced this when taking a practice exam. Sometimes it's not going like the way you want it to, and it's tempting to just pause the exam and maybe look up a quick answer or two. Don't do that. It won't help you ultimately in the end. And also prepare snacks and lunch for the day, or for the day before the exam, to take during your scheduled breaks. Between each section on your MCAT, there's going to be like a 15-minute scheduled break. I think halfway through, there's going to be a 30-minute lunch break. So definitely, when you're doing your practice tests, in order to make sure these are as close to real testing conditions as possible, pre-prepare your snacks and your lunch the day before, so you can just access them quickly, eat them, continue with the test. When you get your score, recognize these following points. Your score may or may not be representative of what you'll get on your actual MCAT. And this is where third parties versus AAMC, they differ. So I did the Kaplan full-length exams. My score started out pretty low, 507, 515-ish, compared to my actual one. Full lengths, like from third parties, do not do the same scoring. They don't do the same scale of scoring. Their questions are different. They tend to be sometimes more difficult. The grading is more difficult. And as a result, that score is not representative of what you're going to get on the real thing or what you're going to get on your AAMC full lengths. So recognize that difference. It's still great practice. And it's a great way to build endurance, taking that 7.5-hour exam. But recognize that that score that you get on a third-party practice exam is probably not going to be super representative of what you'll get on the real deal. Your score does not define your maximum possible score. This second point is super important. On Reddit, I heard like people are like, oh, I'm taking these AAMC full-length practice exams. I scored like, I don't know, 515. Do I have a chance of scoring this score that I really want? And some students will be like, oh, if you want like a 5-point increase, you have to study an extra month. If you want a 10-point increase, you're going to have to study maybe a month and a half to 2 months. Don't believe that. It's different for every person. Your score that you get on any practice full length, depends on that testing conditions. Maybe, that test for some reason was a little bit harder, or you felt like that, and that kind of spiraled, that kind of snowballed down, and you felt like, oh, the rest of the test is not going to be as easy for some reason. Your mental state during that test definitely affects your score, or the way you perform on that test. It's going to be different compared to on your real test day. So your score that you get on any of your practice tests does not define a maximum score that you can ever get. If you get a 510, it's not like you can never get a 515 or 520. Even though Reddit and SDN, some users may say otherwise, recognize that the maximum score that you can get depends on you and how you study and how you review these full lengths. The more effort you put into it, and the more confident you feel in your abilities to review this material and replicate this on another exam, that kind of defines your score. And I know that's a very vague answer, but don't be discouraged when someone says, oh, you can't get the score that you want, because that's not true. You can get whatever you want. The next point is set realistic goal scores for the next practice full length. Let's see. I think full length AAMC full length 1 to AAMC full length 2 was a 517 to a 520 increase. Now, I know that's not much of an increase, but that was something I predicted. I said, you know what, I didn't do well on some of these sections. And maybe on the next time, if I do a little bit more content prep and I review these difficult concepts that I recognize are recurring, maybe I can get a 1-point increase in this section, maybe another 1-point increase in this section, and maybe cars I can do a little bit better or something like that, because cars was a difficult subject for me, as well as psych search. Set realistic goals. Set realistic goals for the next practice full length and try and achieve them. Even if they're small, recognize that those are realistic goals and then celebrate these small improvements. If you see a 1-point increase or a 2-point increase between your practice exams, it may not seem like much, but that is a lot. And that is an improvement, and celebrate that, because that is awesome. And don't get discouraged by score drops. If they drop from a 515 to a 514, it's okay, it happens. Maybe it was the testing conditions for that particular test. Maybe you weren't, operating at your 100%. It's okay. Just recognize it as an opportunity to review and learn from those mistakes, and then apply it or correct it for the next full length. And then the most important thing is afterwards, you must thoroughly review and analyze the entire test. By review, I mean go through every single passage, every single question, recognize what they were asking, what the concept is, make sure you know the concept, check all the correct answer choices, understand why they're correct, check all the wrong answer choices, understand why they're wrong. That's reviewing the entire test. Analyzing the test means, what did I think during this question? How did I feel, or how did my emotions or my thoughts progress during this section? For example, I remember my very first cars passage. It was really, really tough for me on this Kaplan full length. And as a result, I kept thinking about it even when I went on to the next passage and the next passage. And that kind of spiraled out of control. And as a result, I didn't do too well. And that threw me off. And I recognized that after the test. And I told myself, don't worry about it. What are ways we can counter that? And well, I guess some of the ways just to mention was like, if it was a really hard passage, maybe you can move on to another passage to go on and continue and then come back to it later. Or what you can do is close your eyes, take a breather, get back to the passage and read it a little bit more slowly this time. It's okay if it takes a little bit more time. You can catch up, if there's an easier passage later on. So there are techniques to do both. Give me 1 second. My AirPods are.
You good?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, perfect.
Sorry, my AirPods just died a little bit,
It's okay.
but that's okay. But yeah, jumping back to this, like go over that thought process, see, what you can fix, what you can change. And really this whole process is about understanding you and how you operate and how you perform under testing conditions. And then I guess tuning that to the actual exam. How you should use a resource and example. And I'm pretty sure this is the last big slide. I'm sorry. So going back to that psychology, sociology thing, I didn't have a primary resource. I didn't bother studying it, and it was super risky. But what I did do that I feel like was really, really good was I thoroughly reviewed every single concept from my full lengths. So when I took a full length, obviously I didn't know any content because I was just stupid and I didn't prepare. But what I did was I went back, I reread the passage. If there was a term in the passage I did not understand, I would Google search it. I'd read up an article or like a web page that was describing it, and I'd take thorough notes on that. If there's any related topics, I take thorough notes on that as well. And then after that, I go through the questions. If there were terms in the questions I didn't understand, I would Google search them. I'd define them as well. A lot of psychology and sociology is just recognizing these unique psych-soc terms and then applying it to these experimental passages and everything. And that way I continued it all the way down until I got like a good 10, 15 page list of terms and their definitions and concepts and examples. And I know I said that's a lot of notes, but for me, that's what I had to do because I didn't do any content prep beforehand. So please don't do that. Do content prep beforehand and then apply this technique to your practice. But after that, I review it. I give it to my little sister and she'd quiz me on it. And that was the way I kind of studied for psych-soc. I kind of worked backwards. I started with practice and then I studied all the content associated with that. It was risky. It definitely was risky. And I'm very, very lucky that it paid off on my actual exam day because it could have gone completely wrong. But the reason I kept this here is it's a really good example of how you should analyze your full lengths. Every question that you see, every answer choice that you see, you should know exactly why or why not that's correct, how the concept behind it, and how to make sure you don't make that same mistake in the future. And yeah, it's a lot of notes and it's a lot of revision, but that's really where the learning happens. It's not taking the full length, it's reviewing the full length that matters. But yeah, remember, preparing for the MCAT is a marathon with highs and lows. This process is about understanding yourself, your study method, your habits, how you normally tend to think for these kinds of questions and how you need to change them if you do need to change them. Now, what I recommend is choose 3 to 4 months of prep time or time to dedicate towards your prep and make sure it's relatively free. Make sure you don't have any activities when you're planning your schedule. Organize your resources that you chose in that very first part where you chose those list of resources that you want to use. Organize them into your schedule. Recognize what you're going to do this week, when you want to finish a resource, when you want to start another resource like that. And the third point is set realistic short and long-term goals and know what you're going to do every single day. Remember, this is just holding accountable. If you know you want to do 3 chapters this next day as well as some practice, write it down somewhere so that it's, it's actually solidified. It's there, it exists, and you're going to actually do it. And then hold yourself accountable by writing what you did that day afterwards so that, you have a more clear idea of how that week or how your prep is going so far. And then realistic short and long-term goals. Small improvements are realistic, short-term goals. Long-term goals, is like, achieving, how long do you want your prep to be? Do you want it to be 3 months, 4 months? I guess an unrealistic long-term goal would be like, I'm going to study for the MCAT for 8 months. I'm going to study for the MCAT for an entire year before I take it. That's kind of an unrealistic long-term goal because it's difficult to actually maintain active learning during that entire time. It's easy to burn out. An unrealistic short-term goal is saying, I'm going to finish this entire textbook in 1 day. Maybe you will, but it's not going to be good because you might not have that steady foundation afterwards or sturdy foundation afterwards. And then the last point when it comes to creating a schedule is follow your schedule as strictly as possible. Especially when you're self-studying, you have to create your own schedule and then you have to kind of enforce that on yourself. So when you create a schedule that you think works, stick to it as strictly as possible, Know exactly how long you're going to study for each day, how long you're going to study for each subject or each topic, what you're going to do every day, and make sure you do it. It's definitely tricky and it requires a little bit of discipline and effort, and sometimes reminders too, but it's going to benefit you in the future. Also, I'd like to pause real quick. Shri, if you want to add anything, I know that was a lot, please do. Also, for anyone else who has to go, because it is, I think 10 more minutes and then the session ends. But right here at the bottom left of the screen, we have our QR code. I'm going to also have it on a future slide as well towards the end. But if you have to go, we understand. Go ahead and scan that. It'll take you to the attendance form. Remember, the attendance question is, it doesn't matter how many resources you use. It's about how you use them. So fill in that blank and we'll give you those MD points. But Shri, if you can add anything to this spiel of information I just said, that'd be great.
Right. No, it's really great information, and we are recording this, so it will be available on YouTube. So I know, regardless of where you are in the MCAT process, if it's a year from now, come back to this video and really look through this. Honestly, like, I've been to a lot of MCAT workshops, and Kevin is doing an amazing job. This is very thorough and detailed. So I'm glad you guys are here, and hopefully you guys will benefit from all this, because trust me, it's really good. Kevin, can you actually go back to slide 5 of my MCAT schedule?
Yes. Going back to this one.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll talk about my, I guess, quote unquote schedule when I was taking a prep course. Obviously, I can't select the topics I want to do each day. So when I took this prep course, it was in the summer. I was also taking biochemistry 1 at the time. I don't recommend doing that. I thought I could do it, but I found out just taking one class really kind of derailed me. So if you have to, go for it. If you can handle it, go for it. But it's really recommended that you have the least amount of work while you're taking this prep course. So yeah, so I was living on campus over the summer when I took the Princeton prep course, and like I said before, it was in person in at UTD. So and every night, Monday through Thursday, I had a lecture which lasted from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the night. So in the morning, I would, wake up, do my normal things, and then I would study in 2 different sessions. I would study for about roughly 3 hours in each session. Um, I would do my first session, take a break, eat lunch, whatever, and then in my second session, it was around like 2 hours, and that's when I kind of like reviewed my material for the class that I was doing, and see if I can watch like the videos beforehand, and then I would go to class for another 3 hours. So all in all, it was roughly around, I want to say like about 8 hours, Monday through Thursday. Not always 8 hours. Some days I wouldn't self-study that much during the course. Um, but it was a lot of content review, and I felt like I wasn't getting enough practice review. So I had to really enforce that on my own. I think that's what I struggled the most when I was doing a prep course. Um, as far as other scheduling, like I said, after I took this prep course in the summer, I also self-studied a lot that following fall and uh, until my exam. So really, you have to do a little bit of both. And like Kevin really broke it down part by part, as far as using a resource, taking notes. I found out in the beginning taking notes was taking a lot of time, and topics I already kind of have a good grasp on, like OChem. I just read it, just refreshed it. But OChem, make sure you are also learning the lab techniques, because that's something I wasn't fully like comfortable on. So I had to do that. And obviously, cars is something you have to do as much as you can every single day. Obviously, you don't need to do like 50 passages every single day, or don't do like 50 passages at the end of the week. You like, at the very least, do 1 passage in the morning. Um, uh, when you're getting closer to the exam, do like 3 passages, so you can replicate testing conditions, which is a full 90 minutes. I try to do in a cars section, there are 9 passages. So slowly I was trying to reach that 9 passage study sessions. And that really helped me get comfortable and sitting through entire 1 hour and 30 minutes sessions. And I think after content review and after practice problems, I think the next biggest thing that really helps anyone with their score is just sitting for 8 hours straight and not getting distracted. I know that seems really simple, but trust me, when you take your first practice full length, it's going to be painful. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to be hungry. You're going to want to check your phone every 5 seconds. You're going to be distracted. You're not going to be able to focus, which is why you have to do a lot of practice exams. And I say that, but I don't mean like 50 practice exams from every single company. More resources, more practice exams does not equal a better score. Just because you bought every single company's book, every single company's exam, and did every single thing, that doesn't mean you're going to get the best score. Okay. It's like Kevin said, is how you use a resource. And sometimes the resource could be really good, but it might not be beneficial to you because you have a different area of strength and weaknesses, and maybe it's how you're using it. Maybe it's the time of the day you're using it. Maybe it's like the repetition you're doing every single day or saving it till the end of the week. So much goes into MCAT prepping that you really have to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. And I think someone mentioned it before, and I'm not sure, Kevin, if he mentioned it, but before you start prepping for MCAT and start studying, regardless of prep course or self-study, make sure you take a diagnostic test. This will achieve a lot of things. You know, it gives you first exposure on like the MCAT style, the interface, obviously sitting for like that extended duration, and you'll also get to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. Um, just a little caveat though, some of these companies' diagnostic tests are a little bit content heavy and slightly difficult. So they do this because they want you to purchase their prep course. So someone just asked timed or untimed. I really think you should do timed. You can go back and do another second take untimed if you want. That's my personal preference. I think, um, like, I know some prep courses, sometimes they tell you to take it on time, do it, try to get it right before you focus on time. Um, so it's really up to you. I think everyone has different answers. I think it's not the worst thing if you do it untimed, but keep in mind that if you do untimed for any resource, you can't redo that resource because you already know the questions. So make sure whatever resource you utilize, you have enough time to do it and you're doing it properly. And if you do too many resources untimed and trying to just um, be too comfortable, it could also end up hurting you. Obviously, in the beginning, you can be slightly more relaxed and slightly just try to get comfortable with the interface and everything, but just make sure you don't get too comfortable with that and transition over. And yeah, I think that's all I have for that, for scheduling. Just also make sure you don't highlight every single thing. we like it's really hard to say what's important, but just write down notes. So how I wrote down notes is I wrote down notes that I thought I wasn't going to remember. If I read something and I knew for sure, I know that before even reading it in my classes, or like for example OChem, like lifetime, I'm gonna know that for sure. I don't have to write that down. Don't then no need to write it down. I know I get OCD a lot, and that was kind of like my Achilles heel, ankle. So just you have to break a lot of regular habits that you did when you took notes in a regular class. And I also use color mechanical like pencils. That really helped. So make sure you have a system for that. Little caveat again, that also uses about a lot of time switching back and forth between colors. So, you know, it's it's really a double-edged sword. You just have to see what works for you and what time you're spending on. I think, yeah, that's it.
There's also one more thing I want to talk about. So time versus untimed, I didn't include in this PowerPoint, so I thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, I agree with Shri. When it comes to your full lengths, definitely, or practice like diagnostics samples, take them timed. Because not only are you practicing endurance, but you're also practicing solving these questions in a reasonable amount of time, so you don't run out of time at the end of the section. So timed is definitely a great way to practice. When it comes to like, I guess, third party, like other practice, for example, like UWORLD, like questions where you generate your own test, or whether it's like flashcards, or whether it's like, I guess, QPACs or section banks. For those, it's okay to do untimed if you really are struggling with content and you want to like spend a little bit more time thinking through and learning the process. That's okay. But I guess me and Sri highly recommend, for full lengths, definitely do them timed. For diagnostics, do them timed, so you get a good idea of how much time you can accurately spend on each question or in each section. Let me go ahead and jump all the way to this last part. So right here, real quick, I know some of y'all have to go. That's totally okay. Bottom left corner of the screen, go ahead and scan that with your phones. I'll leave it up for 30 more seconds and I'll talk over it. This PowerPoint's not done. We do have one last topic, but it's a very nice, fun, relaxing topic. Once again, I want to mention, I'm really sorry that this is like an information overload. This is really a lot of information. I was thinking about, maybe it might be too much information in one workshop. But a good thing is we're recording this, so you can always access this afterwards. Another thing is, once these slides actually end, there's a question section. Feel free if you feel like a question wasn't addressed or we missed it, or I could give if I could maybe, me and Sri can give another explanation to it. Feel free to turn on your mics at the end and ask that, and we'll stay, or I'll stay as long as I have to. Sri, if you have to go, you definitely can. But we'll do our best to answer that, for as long as it takes. And then on top of that, feel free to DM us, or me at least. Once again, it's up to Sri, but feel free to DM me on GroupMe and ask if you have any specific MCAT questions. I'll do my best to answer them when I can. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the last part of our MCAT, so I don't keep everyone else too long. Staying motivated and how to make MCAT prep suck less. This entire process sucks. It's tough, but it is a process that we all have to go through on our pre-med journeys. So staying motivated is probably one very key way to make this entire process less miserable, to put it lightly. So even though this entire MCAT process and this entire slides were about the MCAT, it's not all about the MCAT. It's really about your physical health, your mental health, your motivation. And also there's other things like reminding yourself about why you're doing this in the first place. And we're going to talk about each of these in a little bit of detail. But first, take breaks and rest days. I already talked about incorporating rest days. Have these fixed rest days that are unchangeable, and enjoy them. And of course, during a day when you're doing your preparation, if for some reason you're not focusing or concentrating, take a break. Take a short 30-minute break, or a power nap, an hour off. And then when you do get back into that prep, hopefully you're a little bit more focused and ready to finish that prep for the day. But definitely incorporate breaks and rest days into your schedule. You don't have to do 8 hours in a row. If you need a break in between, take it, because it's better to come back to the material focused, rather than just push through it, and you're not really paying attention to it. The second thing, exercise and don't skip meals. Credit where credit's due. My mom came up with this. So shout out to her. But exercise and don't skip meals. It's a great way to stay physically and mentally healthy, and stay in shape. I know I gained at least 15 pounds studying for this MCAT because I didn't work out and I just ate junk food the entire time. I was more or less locked in my room studying when I was studying. It's not good. If you can, take 30 minutes out, every day, or maybe an hour every day if you want to, and just, work out a little bit. Try and eat a little bit healthier, home cooked food. Definitely, it takes a while to prep, but it pays off in the end. It's much healthier, and it's a good break too from MCAT preparation. So definitely exercise, don't skip meals. Spend time with family and non-pre-med friends. There's a little asterisk, which means disclaimer. The title should be spend time with family and friends, of course. Family is a great way to de-stress and break away from the MCAT. Same with friends as well. I put non-pre-med friends because you want to make sure that your time away from your prep is 100% not related to the MCAT at all. Pre-med friends do a great job of bringing up, your MCAT prep. So for example, I know I've made this mistake several times, but if I had a senior once, or a junior, an upperclassman who was studying for the MCAT, and he was a PLT leader, and I asked him, "Hey, how's MCAT prep going?" And I immediately saw it in his face. He hated the question, and it just brought back, it just brings back stress. And when you're taking that break, you don't want to think about the MCAT at all. And ideally, people asking about how your MCAT prep is coming is not something you want to incorporate during that break. So non-pre-med friends do a great job of recognizing that you have a big exam, but you need this break, and they won't ask about it, they won't push. I have a roommate who's computer engineering, so he's not pre-med, and he recognized I had a really tough exam coming up. So he recognized that whenever we take a break, like playing video games or something online, because this was over summer when I was studying, he recognized that, okay, this break is something I needed. He also did a good job of reminding me when I'm taking too many breaks, like if I'm playing video games too much or something like that. But definitely, we all have those good friends out there who will respect that boundary and recognize that, this is something that, it's very, very stressful, and we don't want to talk about it too much during our preparation or during our breaks. So definitely spend time with people who can recognize that and respect that. And the last thing I'm going to talk about before I hand it off to Shri is choose the right environment. Once again, credit where credit is due. My mom came up with this one as well. Choose a regular location where you can concentrate. Definitely when you're studying, you don't want to just keep switching it up. The number of variables that you can control, the more, I guess, thorough and regular your preparation is going to be. So for me, my regular location was my room, my bedroom. It was nice. I could close the doors, isolated, and I can really focus, and I had a good light source and everything. Also know how you study best. I know I mentioned this before, but a good example is music versus complete silence. For me, I need complete silence when I'm studying because I kind of like, I guess, repeat the words out loud. So that kind of helps me when I'm studying. I have another friend who studies with a little bit of music and has to study in a public space. I mean, of course, he kind of wants like his own like space to study, but he has to know that there's other people around and things are kind of going on. So yeah, we have different study habits and we prefer different environments when we study, but recognize that before you start your prep and choose a location that's appropriate and will really facilitate a better way of learning and studying.
All right. So those are definitely really great like de-stressors. A little point about the spend time with family and non-pre-med friends. I found it a little bit kind of helpful to talk about the MCAT with others who are also taking the MCAT and also studying for the same exam and have the same exact same date. Just because we can like kind of keep track of each other and make each other accountable. So definitely having like a buddy, accountability buddy, really helps and goes a long way to keep you track, to make sure you guys are joking about it. If there's a topic that you guys really stressing about, if there's an exam that you guys take together, and make sure you guys wake up at the same time and take it, go to the library and take it at 8 o'clock or something like that. So that's also really helpful. So be prepared to change throughout your prep, how you study and where you study and what resources you have to use. Obviously, you don't want to change too much because you want to stay consistent. And if you change too much, your practice exams won't look the same. The topics you understand won't look the same. So just especially this advice applies to cars, the reading section. There's so much various starting points and methods of tackling those passages and questions. Some people say just read the questions. Some people say read the passages or highlight, don't highlight. There's so many advices that you have to change how you do it and see which method works for you. And obviously that applies to the other subjects as well. And yeah, look how people are studying. This is sometimes when, Reddit can be helpful, just so you have some sort of baseline on what people are doing. But it can also be demoralizing if people are saying, I have 520, I don't think I'm going to get into med school. What can I do, or should I retake my 527, stuff like that. That is obnoxious. And that's when you should just close off Reddit. So hopefully you guys know the good aspects and bad aspects of Reddit and see how other people are studying. Obviously there's like Discord channels as well and SDN also, but just be mindful. You guys know what's right and wrong. Just don't get demoralized. There's so many other people out there. Just worry about your own self. And yeah, remind yourself while you're studying, day in and out. Like you might be locked in for 3 months, 8 hours a day, but you know, you have to, when you take those breaks, maybe watch like a medical TV show, or maybe volunteer a little bit. I don't want to say like shadow and volunteer like 20 hours a week, because that gets in the way of your MCAT prep. But like maybe 4 hours a week, volunteering at a hospital or shadowing a doctor that you really enjoy and you want to get into that field is definitely, it really helps because you're in that medical environment. Maybe if you're shadowing someone, you could talk to the doctor and interact with patients. That really, really goes a long way. Obviously not mandatory, and don't do it too much because you won't have enough time to actually prep for your MCAT. But just try to remind yourself in some aspects, maybe keep track of a journal. One thing I actually did forget is to say that keeping track of your progress and what you did every single day, how long your breaks were, what topics you did, when you're taking your exams, what your goals are. Keep track of all that on a spreadsheet. That really it helps you, just in case you have to retake it, or just in case you have to switch it up in halfway through and be like, okay, I made a schedule, but according to what I've done so far, I'm not going to make it. So I have to speed things up. What can I do to alter that? Or I'm going to take a look at my practice exams and those practice scores. Something's not matching up. I keep decreasing. What should I do to increase it? Stuff like that. So definitely keep track of everything on a spreadsheet. Um, that will really help things. And like I said before, with passive and active learning, when you're actively learning, don't have any distractions. Keep your phone away. Just make sure you don't have any tabs open. Turn off your notifications. Tell your friends and family if you're living with people. Um, and passive learning is something I really enjoy, and it really helps. But so you can do passive learning when you're getting ready in the morning, brushing your teeth, etc. And driving. If you have to drive to places every single day, maybe you're driving to the gym or etc. Or to your volunteer place, you can listen to a podcast, you can listen to Khan Academy or a YouTube video. That's when you remind yourself why you're doing this. Or you can also use that time to take a break, like a mental break, and just listen or watch something that you really enjoy. But with all the passive learning you do, like Psych Soch was the most passive learning I've done, because Khan Academy, there's lots of videos where you can, I did like 2 or 3 videos every morning, just simply like getting ready and brushing my teeth that I normally would. So that was areas where I could have saved time. But make sure, after I watched those videos, I also had to make sure I went back and either read the Khan Academy Google Doc, or I had to actually rewatch those videos for active learning, because sometimes it just goes over my head because I'm thinking about something else. But when you are doing active learning, it clicks much quicker because you're reminded of what you just listened to the other day, and especially if you're listening to videos and then going back and rereading that material on text, that also really pairs things up. And there's other strategies like mnemonics, and some people say that writing in blue helps with memory, stuff like that. I don't know. Just try whatever works for you. And yeah, just be cautious and be motivated. If, like Kevin was saying, if you take too long, more than like 5 months, you could start to lose focus. Other things are going to come up. You might focus on your classes more than the MCAT. So make sure you're dedicated when you actually set that MCAT exam date.
And I mean, there's other ways of staying motivated too that we didn't include, like, I guess enjoying a hobby, definitely have a social life and a life outside of MCAT, even during your MCAT preparation. I mean, of course, you're dedicating most of your time during this 3 to 4 or 5 months towards your MCAT prep, but of course, have activities and other stuff to do outside of it as well. The whole goal of this is to survive this marathon and to make it to the end. So definitely do that. So thank you. That's the end of this very long workshop. I know we really condensed, like, I guess 2.5 hours worth of material into 1.5 hours ish. There are some common questions that I got from the last, I guess, interest form that I want to address. And then after that, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to turn on your mics and ask. We'll stay until everyone is satisfied with all those questions. Also, bottom left corner of the screen is the same QR code. So if you didn't get it last time, you can get it this time. But for common questions, first question is, how long should I prep for? How much time should I spend on each subject? How long should you prep for? I feel like we answered that. It's around 3 to 4 months, maybe 5 months at most. Don't go much longer than that because you may burn out. You may forget material that you learned before. Don't go much shorter than that because it may be too little preparation. How long should you spend on each subject? It depends on you. For example, I'm an OChem PLT leader. I didn't spend much time on OChem because I was already confident with that material. Gen Chem, not so much. I had to spend a little bit longer. So really, it comes down to your personal preference, how much you feel you need to spend when it comes to content and content review, practice and practice review. The second question is how much content versus practice. Once again, it's up to you. What we recommend, or what I recommend, is in your 3-month schedule, don't spend more than a month or a month and a half on content. Start your practice as soon as possible after you have a decent base when it comes to content. So I would spend like the first month on content. I'd continue a little bit of content into month 2, but really month 2 and month 3 are really going to be practice and reviewing that practice. I mean, that's what I recommend. Practice is really the most important thing when it comes to this MCAT. It's practicing those kinds of questions, practicing getting into the habit of answering those questions on time and efficiently, and I guess just practicing recognizing what the correct thought process is and how to decipher that on real MCAT questions. Question 3, what happens if I fall behind on my study schedule? It happens. Rest days and having fixed gaps in your preparation usually help with countering that. But if you do fall behind on your study schedule, that's totally okay. Continue doing what you're doing. See if there's maybe another day where you have a lighter course load or less or a little bit more time to catch up, and then do that. Of course, remember, don't push your schedule back like too much, because remember, the one thing that can't be pushed back is your final exam date that you circled in red or boxed in red. That's what I did. But remember, it's okay if you fall back on your schedule. Like I said, it's not perfect usually, and it's always subject to revision. So I guess try and catch up as much as possible. Incorporate breaks to help with that. And if you have to, push it just a little bit. But if it gets too common, I recommend maybe try to countering that as best as you can. And the last question is, how will I know if I'm on the right track? You'll know if you're on the right track if you see progress in any way, shape, or form. So in the beginning, when you're working on content, great. If you're grasping that content, you're progressing, you're on the right track. Now, when you start practice, you may start off very low, but if you feel like your confidence is building towards the end, if your scores are slowly increasing, that's progress. And then when you start taking your full lengths, if you thoroughly review them, no matter how bad the score is on your very first one, if you see a progress or a general trend as you go towards your last few full lengths, that's progress right there. I know, using Reddit and don't use SDN, but using Reddit, there's great posts that give great advice, and sometimes there's posts that might demoralize you because you're like, oh, they're progressing much more quickly than I did. They're doing different material than what I did. Should I change my schedule? Don't. If you're seeing progress and it's going at a decent rate, stick with your schedule. Sometimes you will plateau, and I know we didn't address that in this workshop. We did talk about it in one of the general meetings. Sometimes you will plateau in your schedule. I was fortunate not to, but if you plateau, try it. It always comes back to reviewing that test or those past 2 tests where you plateaued. Figure out where things are slowing down. Figure out how we can improve on that one section that for some reason doesn't want to budge or doesn't want to improve its score. And it really takes a lot of analyzing and reviewing. But if you do that, I promise you will find a way to push past that barrier and break that plateau and continue improving your scores. But yeah, those are all the preset common questions that we had. Does anyone have any other questions? You guys are welcome to turn on your mics and ask. You're also welcome to message in the chat, but I'm going to stay here until everyone's questions are answered. So yeah, does anyone have any questions?
I know that was a lot of information. And thank you guys for sticking through 2 hours of this, almost 2 hours of this. Um, and definitely go back. I don't know if you guys took notes or whatever, but go back and rewatch this at least 2 more times because there's a lot to unpack. Maybe look at a specific part. Obviously, the PowerPoint comes with the YouTube recording if you have to go to a specific part. Um, and obviously, do your own research as well.
There's one question in the chat. I'm just going to read it out and answer it for everyone. When reviewing full lengths, do you recommend reviewing them on the same day or on the next day? I recommend reviewing them on the next day. Full lengths are 7.5 hours long. That's including breaks, and you're going to be very tired. You're going to be very, very tired after that full length. It is not easy, and I've tried it, especially because my schedule is so packed towards that last one. Sometimes I did review on the same day. It's not easy to do that. That's where burnout happens sometimes. Sometimes it's just too much work on one day. So I recommend, save a day for full lengths and then save the next day for like as a day to entirely review that. Most people in their schedules, they like have Saturday as their full length day and Sunday as like a review day. And then the week they kind of continue with their practice. Of course, that's their schedule. Find out what works for you. Try and find like 1 or 2 days where you can really dedicate to full length and then review. But yeah, to answer that question, try and save review on the next day. That way, you're in a better mindset, you're not as tired, and you can, I guess, reanalyze those questions and maybe approach it from a different perspective than the one you had when you took that test. Great question, though. Awesome, no problem.
Also,
yeah.
this wasn't really addressed, but did you talk about like the magic number of 500?
Is that the hours?
Yeah, that's what people say, like 500, 3 months, the standard or whatever, but there's no magic number to that 500 hours. That's like how much you do content review and do practice review or something like that. It just depends on what you need.
I mean, we may have included it. I didn't add it on this slide for specifically that reason, because there's no set schedule. There's no set magic number that you have to hit. And even if you do hit it, or surpass it by twice as many or thrice as many even, there's no guarantee that it's going to benefit at all. I mean, it comes down to knowing how you study and knowing whether you've completed that content, you feel confident in that material or not. So yeah, the magic number of 500, I wouldn't recommend it. I recommend study for as long as you need to, and of course don't go beyond the 5-month mark, but study until you feel relatively confident with that material and with the practice, and then take the test. You'll be ready. Also, I know we didn't talk much about test day material or like test day strategies. I can address that on like a future workshop. But the one thing I can recommend is like the week before your test day, you're going to feel nervous. You're going to think about pushing it back. That's normal. But, actually really sit down and think whether you're ready and it's just nerves, or you're not ready and you really do need to push it back. Make that decision for yourself. And I think there's like a Yerkes-Dodson's law or optimal arousal theory from Psych Soc. On test day, you're going to be a little bit more nervous than, I guess, when you're taking a full length. And that's usually good, as long as it's not too much nervousness. So I guess practice techniques to de-stress a little bit on test day, so that when you take the exam, you have that optimal level of nervousness, so you enhance your performance. So that's a little psychology, sociology, MCAT term. So hopefully you remember that if that question ever does pop up on your real test. But yeah, that's just a little information on test day. Does anyone have any other questions?
We'll definitely have another workshop next semester, obviously, regarding test day, like the week leading up to your test day, how to use your resources leading up to your test day, just I guess more in depth, and like what to do after test day, how to feel during test day, like when you're actually taking the exam, and like how to schedule your exam and what those results mean as far as like the overall like application and all that.
Mm-hmm. And I'll definitely try, and I think the plan is I'm trying to find guests to kind of share their experiences as well. Also, I'm gonna hopefully have a workshop about retests and how that process is slightly different from, I guess, the original preparation, and how you should change that. But really, the focus of next semester workshops are getting more perspectives, bringing on more guests to these workshops to share their experiences. So hopefully you guys find that beneficial. if there's no other questions, you guys are free to leave. No, thank you, no problem. Definitely, scan that QR code so you can get your MD points. And remember, the answer is not about how many resources you choose, it's about how you use them. So be sure to fill that in. But if there's no other questions, you guys are definitely free to go. Thank you guys so much. It's been a really fun workshop, and I'll see you guys next semester.
Thanks for coming, guys. Bye.
All right, man. What a what a workshop.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Oh yeah. Oh.